Hello, this is another one of my videos on Shaykhism, this one dealing with Shaykhi relations with other Shi'is. It comes from Denis Hermann's very long entry on Shaykhism in the Encyclopedia Iranica, which is available online. Denis Hermann is the director of the French Research Institute in Iran and the author of Kamani Shaykhism and the Ijtihad in English, and then in French a book on Shaykhism in the Qajar period. So the relations between the Shaykhi and non-Shaykhi Shi'as. The doctrinal differences between the Shaykhi and non-Shaykhi Shi'is gave rise to serious tensions during the Qajar era, which often took the form of discrimination or the threat of violence. After their forced departure from Karbala in 1843-44, the Shaykhis continued to be victims of violence and a variety of forms of social segregation, although this diminished to a certain extent after the end of the constitutional movement and the accession of the Pahlavis to power, but never disappeared. Those measures were in essence initiated and controlled by members of the clergy, who issued decrees imposing humiliating regulations on the Shaykhis. Such decrees were most often justified in terms of ritual impurity, which followed the idea of unbelief, of which the Shaykhis were accused. We know that the clerics in general considered the infidel to be ritually impure. For the Shi'i jurists, this followed from the first part of the Quranic verse, "O believers, the idolaters are unclean, so they should not approach the holy mosque after this year." The social consequences of these accusations of impurity could be considerable. By means of ijtihad, certain clerics interpreted this concept of ritual impurity very freely in order to impose strict societal regulation of non-Muslim or non-Shi'i religious communities, including non-Usuli Shi'i minorities. These last, for example, found themselves forbidden access to the communal bathhouses. Some Muslims accused of heterodoxy could also be refused the right to be buried in a Muslim cemetery. Still, in the name of ritual impurity, some jurists attempted to segregate economically the members of the Shaykhi community by forbidding all commercial intercourse with them. These execrations, moreover, were accompanied by more or less serious physical violence, depending on the time and place. Every time violence was instigated against the Shaykhis during the Qajar period, the process was quite similar. It was usually a low-ranking clergyman, or sometimes a mujtahid, who would launch a campaign against the Shaykhis by declaring them unbelievers and impure. Then jihad, holy war, was proclaimed against them, and their blood and property was declared to be illicit. This meant that the population was exhorted to pillage and kill them. This pressure, regularly supported by decrees and inflammatory oratory, sometimes remained entirely oral. The purpose was then to forestall any new conversions to the Shaykhi school. The very fact of adherence to Shaykhism was not without risk, so it was natural that some sympathizers were reluctant to take the plunge. On the whole, beyond certain known explosions of violence, such as those that took place at Hamadan in 1898 and Kerman in 1906, I think 1905 and 1906, it's difficult to obtain specific information on the modus vivendi prevailing between the Shaykhis and non-Shaykhis in the Qajar period. It could differ noticeably from place to place. The attitude of the Usuli religious elites of the town or region controlled the situation to a great extent, while Tabriz was shaken by regular and sometimes even violent conflict between Tabrizi Shaykhis and the mainstream Shi'is. The situation was much more difficult in Hamadan. The Shaykhi minority in Tabriz was sizable, armed, and protected by its owner and bandits organized into gangs. The regular confrontations between Tabrizi Shaykhis and the mainstream Shi'is in Tabriz did not lead to the massacre of the Shaykhis of the town, nor to their forced departure even though some clergymen regularly called for jihad against them, and some Tabrizi Shaykhis were killed during the 19th century. The first serious conflict was led by the Mujtahid Haji Mirza Ahmad Khoi. The balance of power gradually evened out, however, and the Tabrizi Shaykhis found themselves less impotent in the face of the violence directed against them. The two communities lived in distinct quarters of the town and did not intermarry. Hamadan and Kerman, on the other hand, were racked by veritable civil wars. Many Shaykhis of Hamadan were killed in 1897-98, and most of the survivors were forced to flee. The war broke out shortly after the assassination of Nasruddin Shah at the beginning of the month of Shawwal, 1315, that's late February 1898. The many excommunications and declarations of impurity against the Shaykhis of the town, led by several local clerics, including Mullah Abdullah Burujadi, were the starting point of the call for holy war in the way of God against the Shaykhis. Several hundred or thousand thugs of the town and region participated in extreme violence. Many Shaykhis were tortured and killed, and their houses and businesses systematically looted. Most of the survivors, including the master of the school, Muhammad Baqir Hamadani, were forced into exile. While the methods aimed at the eradication of Shaykhism in Kerman were very similar to those used in Hamadan, the consequences were not the same, because the violence against the Shaykhis proved a failure, and its perpetrators succeeded neither in killing them nor in forcing them to flee. A cleric from Khorasan, Shamsiri, and a cleric from the town, Mirza Muhammad Raza, surrounded themselves with looters and thugs when they called for jihad against the Kermani Shaykhis at the beginning of the month of Jamada 1323, that's July 1905. Unlike at Hamadan, this conflict did not erupt, but seethed under the surface, with extreme violence extending over several months between periods of relative calm. The Kermani Shaykhis notably were able to benefit from the stronger reaction of local government forces that attempted to put an end to the aggression against them. On the other hand, the Shaykhi master, Muhammad Khan, was forced to leave Kerman for the nearby town of Langar, and these events remained etched in the memory of Kermani Shaykhis throughout the 20th century. So thank you for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement, without which I wouldn't be able to make these videos. If you want to, you're very welcome to support my channel. Please do like, comment and share on the videos. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. It really is helpful. I'll give Patreon and PayPal links below in case you want to provide practical support. Next week we're going to go over somewhat the same ground as this week when I talk about Denis McEwan's long essay on the Balasaris and Shaykhis in Iranica. Have a good day.